Today on the show, we're going to talk about the third and my favourite Robin, Tim Drake. If you didn't know that in terms of sales, reception, and legacy, he is the most successful Robin, then this show is for you. Short disclaimer before we get started. Obviously this video is longer than usual, so I have had to miss out some facts about Tim Drake. However, I have included everything that I felt was majorly important. So Tim Drake. He would first appear in Batman number 436 and would become Robin in 1989, and things would stay that way for 20 years. Then in 2009, he would become Red Robin. Tim is a very different character from both Dick Grayson and Jason Todd. First off, while those two focused on the physical side of crime fighting, Tim focuses on the mental side of crime fighting. This is due to the fact that comics changed a lot in the 80s and fans were kind of bored of the brute force characters, so it just made sense to have more of a intelligent Robin as opposed to a physical Robin. As far as Tim's family life went, it wasn't amazing, but it was definitely stable. Both his parents were alive and healthy, and although they travelled around the world a lot and Tim was always put into boarding schools, they did love each other very much, which made him even more different from the previous two Robins who didn't have any parents. DC needed to find a creative way to make sure that Tim Drake would be accepted by fans. So when Tim Drake went to Dick Grayson asking to be Robin, they had Dick Grayson accept him straight away, and as such, fans accepted him straight away as well. Fans loved Tim Drake. They loved him so much that he got multiple miniseries before getting his own main series in 1993, which ran for 183 issues and ended in 2009. Then when Tim became Red Robin, he would get his own series as Red Robin as well. So all this being said, Tim is very clearly impressive. So to learn about him, we might as well start at the beginning. So Tim was in attendance to Haley's circus the night the Flying Graysons died, and he would see Dick Grayson do a quadruple somersault. Many years later, he would see the adventures of Batman and Robin, and he would see Robin do a quadruple somersault, something that Dick Grayson was known for doing. Tim would do some research into Dick Grayson, and he would find out that Dick Grayson actually became Bruce Wayne's ward. He would put two and two together and realize the playboy that had muscles on his muscles and the acrobatic teenager had to be Batman and Robin. From that moment onwards, Tim would closely watch Batman and Robin's adventures. Then when Robin disappeared and Nightwing came on the scene, he would put two and two together and realize that Dick Grayson was just Nightwing. Now obviously Jason would die, but to Tim this just looked like the second Robin had disappeared. And Tim would notice that Batman was getting a lot more violent, a lot more erratic, and it looked like he would become a killer. Tim decided in that moment that he wanted to be Robin, but he knew that if he sprung into action straight away, he'd probably get rejected, so he waited for the optimum moment, and then when Nightwing came back to the city, he sprung into action and went to Nightwing for help. A whole mess of things would happen, but basically Tim and Alfred would end up working together to save Batman and Nightwing, and after this, Batman would accept Tim as Robin, but only on a trial basis. Now, while Tim was really intelligent, he had next to no physical ability, so he had to be trained for longer than both Jason and Dick. First, he would train with Alfred, then with Bruce, and then with Nightwing in the art of being Robin. Around this time, Tim's parents were traveling through Haiti and they'd be captured by this man named the Obeah Man. They would both drink this liquid from the Obeah Man, which caused his father to fall into a coma and his mother to die. Tim would stay with Bruce while his father was in a coma, and when Tim's father eventually woke up, it would be revealed that he is now paraplegic. However, thanks to physical therapy, he would regain the use of his legs over time. It's during this time that Tim would go overseas to get some training in Paris. And while nothing individually important would happen during this time, we would see just how good Tim's moral compass is, and it turns out that it's actually very, very good. Now, when it came to taking down criminals, Batman did have very strict rules with Tim. The main one being that if they were facing a known killer like Two-Face or the Joker, Tim had to fall back and go and get help. Not only do I think Bruce is being really responsible by doing this, I do think it speaks volumes about just how much Jason's death affected him. Now, we all know that Bane would break Bruce's back and throw him off a roof, and Bruce was put near death, and Tim would actually stay near Bruce's side the whole time until he woke up. Obviously, with a broken back, Bruce couldn't be Batman, so Jean-Paul Valley, who was Azrael, would temporarily become Batman, and he and Robin would kind of get along to start with, and then things would go south. Jean-Paul didn't realize that there was more to being Batman than the costume and the mantle. He was violent, he was dark, and he was downright evil. Bane was able to figure out Bruce's secret identity, and when Bruce found this out, he was scared that he might have also been able to figure out Tim's identity. So Bruce would go to Tim's house to meet with Jack Drake, Tim's father. Upon Bruce's arrival, it would be revealed that Jack had already been kidnapped. At about the same time, Jean-Paul and Tim had a giant argument over morals in being Batman and Robin, and Tim would just be like, you know what, I'm done with you, and would go home, and upon arriving home, he would find Bruce and would find out that his father is missing. Bruce and Alfred would go on the hot trail to find Jack's captors, and Tim would have to stay in Gotham and act as if his father was on a business trip. Tim felt really alone and put in the dark. He didn't have any parental figures in his life, and the new Batman totally didn't want him, and he felt like it was all his fault. Nightwing would do his best to cheer up Tim, and it seemed to work, and Tim was even vital in Azrael taking down Bane, which is an amazing thing. Now, Azrael had actually previously undergone some brainwashing that was intended to help him, and it was called the System, but it was actually the source of his erratic behavior. And eventually, Azrael would attack Tim in the Batcave, and Tim would be forced to leave. It's around this time that Tim would meet Spoiler, and he would very quickly realize that she was Stephanie Brown because he was investigating Cluemaster at the time, and Cluemaster was Stephanie Brown's father. Bruce would return to Gotham with Jack Drake, and it would be revealed that he was considering retiring from being Batman. But the whole Azrael situation would be explained to him, and he would admit that he has no choice but not to retire. Bruce would actually be angry at Tim for not stopping Azrael himself, but Tim was like, what do you expect me to do? He's crazy and bigger than me, and he sealed off the Batcave. Bruce would undergo training to get back into peak physical condition so he could retake the Batcave, and after this the dynamic duo were back in action. I'm not exactly sure where else I'm going to put this, so it's just going to go right here. Upon returning to Gotham, Jack Drake would get a physical therapist named Dana Winters, and he would enter a relationship with her, and eventually he would get married to her, and she would become Tim's stepmother. Eventually, a series of robberies would happen, and there were very blatant clues at each of the scenes, which all pointed to Cluemaster. So Batman and Robin both went to go and visit him in prison. Here, it will be revealed that the gangs are holding Cluemaster's daughter Stephanie hostage and forcing him to work for them, otherwise Stephanie is going to get hurt. So the duo would go and rescue Stephanie, and Stephanie would say, no, Cluemaster is in on the whole thing. The gang that Cluemaster was working for would be apprehended, and Stephanie would actually tag along on this mission as Spoiler, and she would flirt with Tim the whole time. Now, I do just want to say right now that although Stephanie was flirting with Tim, Tim would reject her advances because he already had a girlfriend. Next, the apocalypse virus would break out in Gotham, and Tim would have to find a survivor called Kendall Stewart, but then he and Catwoman would be attacked by a bounty hunter named Tracker. Azrael would save Robin and Catwoman, but then Kendall Stewart would be killed by the order of Saint Dumas, so Robin just goes to help out Nightwing and Huntress calm down the rioters. Next, Tim would get infected with the virus himself, and he would have all of these hallucinations as he was slowly dying, but thankfully Azrael was able to find a cure for the virus. Then it would be revealed that the cure wasn't a cure after all, it just put the virus in a dormant state. So Robin, Batman, and Nightwing would all travel to Sudan to try and find a cure, and here it would be revealed that Ra's al Ghul was actually controlling the virus. A whole mess of things would happen, but basically Robin, Huntress, and Nightwing would track down Ra's al Ghul's boat, and Robin would steal a whole bunch of data from Ra's computer as the boat explodes. Next, Tim Drake and Bart Allen would meet one another while on a skiing trip to Colorado, and this would mark the beginning of a long and beautiful friendship. After this, Tim would visit his girlfriend Ari, and he would get the shock of a lifetime when she would walk out in her underwear asking Tim for sex. Turns out a guy had tried to rape her, and while he was unsuccessful, she was left feeling very, very vulnerable. Tim would turn down her request, saying that he wasn't ready. Coincidentally, Ari's uncle and aunt would come home and see Ari and Tim sitting there with Ari in her underwear, and Ari's uncle would try to physically attack Tim, so Tim would leave. In the aftermath of this, Ari would be transferred to an all-girls school and Tim would be grounded by his father who found out about this situation, but Tim was actually able to solve crimes from his bedroom by watching the news. Now eventually this event called the Cataclysm would happen, which was basically this giant earthquake that leveled most of Gotham City. We're not exactly going to go into details of that in this video, one, because I want to give that story arc its own video, and two, because Tim wasn't exactly vital in it. He was present, but he wasn't vital. Around this time, Tim would begin to realize that he actually does have feelings for Stephanie, so he would break up with Ari, and the breakup was totally mutual, it was very easy, and the two of them were very happy and they would remain friends, if you're ignoring the fact that Ari would never be seen again in a Batman comic. Young Justice would eventually be formed and he had a great time working with this team. He would be especially close with Superboy and Impulse, and would actually be their leader. However, just before the Imperiex War, it would be revealed that Batman kept secret tabs on every single member of the Justice League, and he could kill all of them off on the drop of a dime. Because of this, there were trust issues regarding Batman, and this extended to Robin as well. When Young Justice were on Apokolips, this would be revealed to Robin, and he felt betrayed by his team, so upon their return to Earth, Robin would leave Young Justice. Tim would eventually rejoin Young Justice, but Wonder Girl would be voted leader, and he was fine with this because he knew Wonder Girl could handle it. If you want more information on Young Justice, I actually did a video on them quite a while back, so feel free to click the link in the description below. The reason Young Justice would eventually split up was because in a crossover with the Titans, Donna Troy and Omen would both be killed, and Young Justice would feel like they weren't really experienced enough to be running a team on their own, and as such they only got people hurt. Eventually, Beast Boy, Cyborg, and Starfire would open up a new Titans Tower in San Francisco and would ask Impulse, Wonder Girl, Superboy, and Robin to be weekends only Teen Titans in training. Around this time, Tim would turn 16 and he would receive a hologram of what appeared to be Alfred of the future, and he would say a member of the Bat family betrays the rest. However, after some detective work, it would be revealed that all of this was a stunt created by Batman to test Tim's detective skills. Now, I mention this not for the mission, but for the fact that Tim turned 16. You know, comic book characters don't exactly age all that much, so it's important to take note of when they do. Around this time, Jack Drake would notice that Tim had a black eye, and Tim would lie about the source of this black eye, and Jack didn't believe him whatsoever. So he goes up to Tim's room while Tim was out and searches through all of his stuff, and he finds Tim's Robin uniform, his Robin equipment, and everything to do with Batman. Jack would confront Bruce about this situation, and he would find out the truth about Batman and Robin. Jack would then demand that Tim quits being Robin straight away, otherwise he's going to reveal Batman's secret identity to the whole of Gotham. Soon after Tim was forced to quit, Stephanie Brown would become Robin, but she would eventually be fired for disobeying orders. And the last Robin to disobey orders was Jason Todd, and we all know how well that turned out. Unsurprisingly, Gotham would eventually be plunged into a gang war, and Tim's father demands that Tim stays at home, but Tim disobeys his father and goes out and protects students in his civilian identity. Tim would be forced to become Robin again, and Batman is all like, I was kind of expecting this, and Tim's father agrees that the city needs a Robin just as much as it needs a Batman. The gang war would come to an end, and Stephanie Brown would die in its aftermath. Tim didn't exactly have a huge reaction to her death, he would just return to active duty with Batman. Following this, the superhero community would become very tense following some attacks on the family members of the Justice League. Batman and Robin would receive a transmission from Oracle stating that Tim's father needed to talk to him straight away. It would be revealed that there was somebody in the Drake household, and Tim's father found a gun with a note, and the note suggested that Tim's father protect himself. Tim's father says that he loves Tim. No matter what happens, he loves Tim and he is so proud of him. The person inside the house turned out to be Captain Boomerang, and Jack and Captain Boomerang would kill one another in the exact same moment. Eventually, Jason Todd would come back on the scene and he wanted to know if Tim Drake was really as good as everyone said, and he and Tim would have this massive fight that Tim would eventually collapse. The only thing this fight served to prove is that Jason has the physical side of things down. Yes, Jason is strong, we all knew that, that wasn't a surprise. The point of being Robin is having equal balance between strength and smarts, and by this point, Tim Drake had that down. And this is what makes him a much better Robin than Jason Todd. Infinite Crisis would come about, and Tim would be involved in this massive team-up between the Doom Patrol, the Society, and the Teen Titans, which to this day I think is a really weird team-up and it really shouldn't have worked. After this, Tim would lead an assault on one of Lex Luthor's genetic research labs to try and find a cure for Superboy, who was dying at this point, and he would also be put in charge of the superhero rescue efforts in Bloodhaven, but then the Titans would be kicked out of the city. Robin would find out about Superboy's death in the North Pole, so he would go to Metropolis to help fight the Society. The heroes would win, but it was a shallow victory because there were so many deaths. In 52, the year between Infinite Crisis and 1 year later, Robin would create himself a new costume that was red and black to honor Superboy because red and black were Superboy's colors. In 1 year later, Bruce would adopt Tim and the two of them would take out all major crime in Gotham, but then it would be revealed that Cassandra Cain, who was Batgirl, had turned evil and had taken over the League of Assassins, and she would demand that Tim joins her, and he would refuse. Soon after this, it would be revealed that Tim had been trying to clone Superboy, and Wonder Girl would point out to him that this was a futile effort because it wouldn't be the same Superboy. The two of them would share a grief-stricken kiss before Wonder Girl would run away crying, but nothing would ever become of this relationship. Damian would eventually turn up at Wayne Manor to warn the Bat family that Ra's al Ghul had returned, and Tim doesn't believe him at all, and the two of them would fight, but Tim would actually be told off by Alfred just before the manor would come under siege from the League of Assassins. Tim and Damian would be kidnapped, and Ra's would ask Tim to work at his side and would even tempt Tim with promises of resurrecting his parents and all of his lost friends. Batman and Ra's then go off to Nanda Parbat, and Tim and Damian have to fight their way through all of these ghost ninjas. The key moment for Tim in all of this is when he's actually considering Ra's al Ghul's offer. Obviously Nightwing would try and convince him out of this, but then I Ching would turn up and separate Tim and Nightwing, and Tim has to make the decision for himself, and he would break down crying. In Tim's mind, he thinks that he's being selfish by not taking Ra's up in his offer. You see, in his mind, he can bring back all of his friends and family who died too soon just by giving up his own life. But he can't do so. He can't bring himself to give up his own life. Eventually, the rest of the Bat family would catch up to Batman in Nanda Parbat, the day would be saved, and they would realize it's Christmas on their way home and would share a toast to family. This is important because when push comes to shove, Batman is really about family. A really weird family that defeats criminals and wears spandex together, but a very close family nonetheless. After this, Stephanie Brown would return and it would be revealed that she faked her death, and that's a whole rabbit hole we are going to get into in my Stephanie Brown video. Next, a story arc called Batman RIP would happen, and we're not exactly going to cover that in this video because it deserves its own video because it is really good. Now here's where things begin to get a little bit complicated. Bruce Wayne would be killed by Darkseid in Final Crisis, and a massive gang war in Gotham would break out, and the whole Bat Network would be summoned to Gotham to help out. Tim would ask Dick to become Batman, and Dick would refuse, but then Jason puts on his own Batsuit and starts violently gunning down enemies, so Tim puts on a Batsuit and would end up getting stabbed by Jason, and then he'd have to be rescued by Damian. Dick and Jason would go on to have this massive battle, and Dick would win and become Batman. This is a really important move, because the reoccurring theme with Tim is that he never wants to be Batman, and in a storyline called The Titans of Tomorrow, it's seen that if he does become Batman, he becomes dark and he becomes a murderer. Tim honestly believes that Bruce is still alive somewhere, he can just feel it. But everyone in the Bat family just kind of blows him off and doesn't take him seriously, so Tim goes off to Europe and tries to find Bruce for himself and takes up the mantle of Red Robin when Damian Wayne replaces him as Robin. Tim would keep following clues, keep doing his detective thing, until he found a cave painting that contained proof that Bruce Wayne was still alive and that he was just lost in time. And the fact that he found this proves that Tim Drake is an amazing detective. Tim would eventually be reunited with Superboy in Paris, and the two of them would be working together to find a mother box so they could get to New Genesis, but Tim would break down and tell Superboy of all the hardships that he's had since Superboy has been away, shall we say. Superboy would comfort Tim and tell him that he believes that Bruce has to be alive somewhere too. Upon Tim's return to Gotham, there'll be this whole mess of things involving Lucius Fox, Ra's al Ghul, and Hush, but basically at the end of it, Tim would be appointed the CEO of Wayne Enterprises, and this results in Tim getting kicked out of a window by Ra's al Ghul. After this, Tim would apologize to his friends for the dark direction that he's taken, and he would finally reveal his evidence of Bruce Wayne being alive. And all of this is so good because Tim's strength has always been from knowing when to use his friends and knowing when to call in backup. After this, the only majorly important thing that Tim would do would be take part in the final battle of the Teen Titans. And then the New 52 would happen, and I really like Tim Drake in the New 52, surprisingly. Lots of people don't, but I do. I'm not going to get into his origin story here because it's really not needed, but it really does remove the fact that he struggled with the physical side of things, which I think takes a little bit away from his character, but all of his personality is still there and still intact, and that's what's important. Here's my criticism of Tim Drake in the New 52. Tim Drake doesn't need the Teen Titans anymore. The Teen Titans needs Tim Drake. I think the Teen Titans should have been written with an entirely original cast, and Tim Drake should have just continued his Red Robin series in the New 52. Like, I would like a series that runs for 6 months and then it goes on hiatus for 6 months, and during that 6 months that is on hiatus, Tim is in a different person's series every one of those months. And then when it picks up again, Tim knows that he can call in for help from any of those people that he's just helped out in the previous 6 months. I hope that made sense to you because I honestly love this idea. It would give Tim room to work with other people while knowing that he can work on his own, and he would also be able to push the limitations of doing things on his own before he has to call in backup. What I don't want is for Tim Drake to ever become Batman, because I think that'll be way too easy of a move to make. I think Tim Drake will be everything that he can be and more when he finally gets his own series again, because that's what he deserves. It's super effective! Okay guys, that is it for today. If you think I missed anything important about Tim Drake, please let me know in the comments down below. And also don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more history. And also don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. My name is Faust, this has been Exploring Comics, and it is super effective.